The world spun slowly as Amara Johnson's eyes cracked open to warm rays bleeding through gauzy curtains. Her head throbbed with a dull ache, like distant thunder buried under champagne and string quartet melodies. Velvet sheets clung to her bare skin, her breath caught. This was not her bed. This was not her room. Her heart pounded against her ribs as the haze of the night before fought to return. She turned, barely breathing, only to find a man sleeping soundly beside her, his body half covered, chiseled like a statue, the planes of his face impossibly perfect, the jawline sharp enough to cut diamonds, blonde hair tousled, lashes resting on high cheekbones. And then the brutal realization struck her like a slap. She had no idea who he was. Panic surged. She threw the covers aside, scrambling to find her dress, her shoes, anything that would get her out before he woke. Her fingers trembled as she clasped her bra, yanking her crumpled uniform from the floor. Her heart wouldn't slow, not even when she finally reached the door. But as she fumbled with the lock, she froze. Something was missing. Her necklace. The delicate gold chain with a tiny star pendant. The only thing she had left of her mother. She scanned the suite ornate, golden-toned, eerily quiet, and spotted nothing. Swallowing her scream, she knew she couldn't afford to search. Not now. Not with him lying just feet away. So she made a choice leave, and never look back. Moments later, the man stirred. Ryan Carter, 32, CEO of Carter Group, billionaire, fashion mogul, and media darling with a reputation for being as elusive as he was desirable. He sat up slowly, rubbed his temple, then reached for the glass of water on the nightstand. His head was foggy, but what lingered wasn't the alcohol. It was a scent. Floral, soft, faintly sweet, like jasmine and vanilla, and the image of a silhouette, a woman with warm brown skin, her curls wild and free, her touch fire and silk. But the rest was blank. He cursed under his breath. Who was she then? Something caught his eye, on the floor near the bed, the glint of gold. A necklace, small star pendant, delicate, feminine. He picked it up and turned it in his fingers, etched on the back, almost too faint to see. To my star. His breath caught, a memory stirred bare skin glowing in candlelight, laughter muffled by kisses, and a whisper, "Don't forget me." But he had. Completely. Later that morning, Amara stood in the staff locker room, pale and shaking. She stared at herself in the mirror, eyes haunted. She didn't do things like this, ever. A one-night stand, with a guest, with a stranger. Shame burned her throat. "Girl, you look like you've seen a ghost," her co-worker Bree said, leaning against a locker. I overslept." Amara lied. "And I lost something. Something important." "Let me guess. Your mind?" Bree chuckled. "Come on. You're off the schedule tonight. Go home. Rest." But Amara didn't go home. She spent the afternoon obsessing. Had she imagined it all? Had she really slept with him? What if he remembered? What if he didn't? And worst of all, what if he found her necklace across the city? Ryan stared at the necklace again. He'd been through every angle of hotel security footage. But the woman never looked up at the cameras, only the back of her head, her curls, the curve of her neck, the way she held herself unaware that she was about to change everything. His assistant, Samuel, entered the office. "You're needed for the board meeting, sir. But also, the hotel staff found this list. It includes all temporary workers from last night. Ryan took the list with barely disguised urgency, scanned through, and then paused. Amara Johnson, food and beverage, floor 49. His fingers tightened on the paper. A name, finally. Back in her tiny apartment, Amara stared at an envelope she couldn't open. Inside was her brother's medical bill final notice. She didn't have $12,000. She barely had enough for next week's rent. Her phone buzzed. A message from the hotel. Please report to the Carter Group head office tomorrow at 900 a. Mr. Carter requests a meeting? Her heart stopped. What did he want? The next day, she stepped into the sleek marble lobby of Carter Group's headquarters, feeling like an imposter. The receptionist waved her through as if she belonged. On the 51st floor, Samuel led her to a private conference room. When the door opened, Ryan stood there in a charcoal suit, sharper than any man had the right to look, the star necklace glinting in his palm. "You left this," he said. Amara stared at the necklace, then at him. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I didn't mean to." He nodded slowly. "You probably don't remember much of that night. I remember enough." Her eyes flicked away. It was a mistake, maybe. His gaze held hers. "But it's also an opportunity." She frowned. "What are you talking about?" He took a breath, then dropped the bombshell. "I want you to pretend to be my girlfriend, publicly, for the next 3 months." Amara blinked. "What I'm under pressure to appear, stable, domestic. The media is tearing me apart. Investors want a softer image. You and I, well, we already have history and chemistry. You want me to lie to the entire country, I'll pay you. Handsomely." He placed a check on the table, $300,000. Her knees almost gave out. "I don't even know you," she said hoarsely. "You knew me for one night," he countered, voice low. "And you stayed." Amara's breath caught. She looked at the check, at the necklace, at him. A mistake had already changed everything. What would happen if she said yes? She picked up the necklace, held it tight. "I have conditions," she said. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." And just like that, the game began. Amara sat in the back seat of the sleek black town car. Her fingers clenched tightly around the edges of the contract. She hadn't read every line yet. There hadn't been time. But the words exclusive partner and strict confidentiality stared back at her like handcuffs disguised in cursive font. Her reflection in the window stared back wide eyes, lips pressed in a tight line. A woman pretending to be composed while her insides twisted in a knot. Outside. The city blurred past, skyscrapers slicing into a slate-colored sky. She had no idea how she got here. Or maybe she did. Desperation. A moment of weakness. A man too powerful to say no to. But more than that curiosity, something about Ryan Carter unnerved her in a way that made her feel alive. When they arrived at the Carter estate, it was almost dusk. The mansion rose like a modern-day castle, all glass and clean lines, perched on the edge of a hill that overlooked the city like it owned it. Samuel escorted her in with a tight smile, and before she could fully take in the size of the living room walls of glass, steel staircases, the scent of citrus and cedar. Ryan appeared at the top of the stairs, sleeves rolled to his forearms, barefoot, a glass of whiskey in hand. "Welcome to your new home," he said, voice smooth but distant, like the words were practiced. They dined in silence. The food was perfect filet mignon, grilled asparagus, roasted sweet potatoes, but Amara tasted none of it. Her stomach twisted too tightly. Ryan watched her. but not in the way she expected. There was no heat in his gaze tonight, only calculation. She recognized it. She'd seen it in the mirror. Both of them had learned to guard themselves behind armor. Later. In the guest suite, her new room, Amara unpacked slowly, fingers brushing over worn cotton shirts and the small framed photo of her and Elijah, her brother, smiling before the world turned sour. She placed the photo on the nightstand like a shield and sank onto the edge of the bed. Her phone buzzed. A message from Bree. "You okay? I saw a headline, Ryan Carter's mystery girlfriend spotted at his penthouse, girl." "Are you serious?" Amara turned the phone over without replying. Outside, the city sparkled. She felt nothing like someone living in a penthouse. She felt like a stranger in someone else's fairy tale. The next morning, the game began. Ryan's PR team swept in stylists, photographers, branding experts. She was dressed in sleek neutrals, coached on how to walk beside him without looking either too clingy or too distant, and briefed on the basics of the Carter family history. Smile like you're in love, but not like you're obsessed, one assistant whispered before the first public outing. At a charity gala that evening, flashbulbs popped like fireworks. Ryan's hand settled lightly on the small of her back. He leaned in, whispering something meaningless, something about red wine, and Amara laughed on cue. She hated how easily she could pretend, but not all of it was pretend. Sometimes, in the spaces between, when the cameras weren't watching, Ryan's touch lingered a beat too long. Sometimes he looked at her like he was trying to remember something he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Once, during a rooftop cocktail hour, he murmured, "You handle all this better than I expected." She didn't know how to respond, so she said nothing. But her chest ached with the desire to ask, "What did you expect me to be?" Just another woman wearing borrowed diamonds. 3 weeks in, cracks began to form. It started with the necklace. She'd thought it was safe, hidden away in the drawer beside her bed. But one morning, it was gone. She tore through the suite, heart pounding. Ryan found her in the hallway, barefoot, hair wild, panic in her voice as she asked if the staff had moved anything. "Calm down," he said, brow furrowed. "It's probably misplaced. I'll have Samuel check." But there was something strange in his expression. Like he knew something she didn't. Like he recognized that necklace meant more than jewelry. Then came the call from Elijah's care facility. The payments were delayed, a glitch in the trust Ryan's team had set up. They said Amara called Ryan, but he didn't answer. She called again. Nothing. By the time he walked into the house that evening, she was waiting in the foyer, fury etched into her spine. "You said he'd be taken care of," she snapped. Ryan's calm broke like glass. "Do you think you can speak to me like that?" he said coldly. "This isn't a fairy tale. Amara, you signed a contract. I help you. You help me. I'm not some pawn," she shot back. "You don't own me just because you paid me." His jaw tightened. For a moment, silence stretched so taut it could break. Then he stepped closer, voice low. "You think I don't know what it's like to want to save someone?" There was something raw in his eyes. "You think this is easy for me that night?" She couldn't sleep. She stood on the balcony, watching the stars. Her mother's words echoing in her mind. "Always protect your heart, baby, especially from beautiful men with broken eyes." The next morning, Ryan left early for meetings. Amara wandered through the house, restless, until she reached the off-limits third floor. Curiosity got the better of her. She climbed the stairs, heart pounding, and opened the door to a dark, immaculate room filled with boxes, old photographs, newspaper clippings, awards, and in the corner, a small, dust-covered piano. On top of it, a faded photo of Ryan as a child. Standing beside him, a woman with the same eyes. His mother, she guessed. She picked up one article. Fashion heiress, killed in car crash, Carter Group mourns. Another beside it. Scandal erupts over secret family assets. There was something else. Something. A name she didn't recognize. A foundation. And then a check unsigned, addressed to the same care home where Elijah stayed. Her stomach dropped. Ryan had known about Elijah long before the deal. This wasn't random. This wasn't business. When he returned that evening, she was waiting. "You knew about my brother before you met me," she said, voice shaking. Ryan's face didn't change, but his posture did, a slight flinch. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I wanted to understand who you were. After that night, before I brought you into this circus." "You manipulated me," she whispered. "I protected you," he said quietly. "I didn't want to just use you. But I didn't know how to ask you to stay for real." The silence was thick with too many truths. She should have screamed, walked out, thrown the necklace in his face. Instead, she whispered, "I'm still wearing the dress from that first event." And he said, "I remember. You looked like you belonged here." They didn't kiss, not then, but the air between them shifted. Whatever they were pretending, it wasn't pretend anymore. Still, Amara knew something had changed. And she wasn't sure yet if that was salvation or the beginning of the fall. It had been 47 days. Amara knew this because she had begun counting them the way one might count the slow erosion of a shoreline, subtle at first, then undeniable. 47 days of shared dinners that pretended to be business, of accidental touches that lingered too long, of silent looks that said too much. The contract they signed had clear boundaries, but somewhere along the way, the boundaries began to blur. Not because they were reckless, but because pretending to be in love was far too close to the real thing. Ryan had stopped correcting people when they called her his girlfriend. And Amara had stopped reminding herself it wasn't true. What unsettled her most wasn't the act, it was how effortless it had become. The morning air inside the Carter estate was cool, sunlight spilling in through the endless panes of glass, warming the marble floors. Amara sat at the edge of the breakfast bar, cradling a mug of coffee she hadn't touched, her eyes fixed on the piano upstairs. She hadn't gone back into that room since the day she found the photo of Ryan's mother. She hadn't brought it up, either. Some truths felt like live wires. You touched them once, and the burn never quite faded. Ryan entered the kitchen in a tailored navy suit, knotting his tie with practiced precision. He looked too perfect for someone who hadn't slept much. She could see it in the tightness around his mouth. He hadn't asked her to sleep in his bed. But he also hadn't brought another woman home since she moved in. That meant something. Or maybe it didn't. "We're doing a joint interview today," he said casually, grabbing a protein bar. "Carter Foundation's anniversary. They want to see the human side of the company." "Do they know it's a lie?" she asked. Not accusing, just curious. He paused. "Does it feel like one to you?" She didn't answer. The interview was hosted at a minimalist art gallery in Soho. All white walls and floating sculptures. Cameras flashed the moment they stepped out of the car. Ryan's hand brushed hers, steadying her. Or himself? She couldn't tell. The questions started soft. Then came the pivot. A female journalist, all red lips and sharp eyes, leaned forward. "Mr. Carter, people are curious, how did you and Amara meet?" Before Ryan could respond. Amara smiled and said, "We met unexpectedly and completely out of character for both of us." A soft chuckle echoed in the room, and Ryan turned to look at her, something like admiration flickering behind his eyes. After the event, in the silence of the car ride back, Ryan turned toward her. "You're getting good at this." "I have to be," she said. "People are watching." He nodded but said nothing else. Something had shifted again. That night, she found a note on her pillow written in his handwriting. "Join me on the rooftop. Midnight." She wrapped a blanket around herself and climbed the stairs barefoot, the city lights glowing like fireflies around them. Ryan stood near the edge, a bottle of wine in hand, 2 glasses resting on the ledge. "It's not champagne," he said. "But it's the only thing in this house I picked out myself." She took the glass he offered, eyes meeting his. "Why did you ask me up here?" He hesitated, then gestured toward the skyline. "Because there's something about this city. Everything feels so close and untouchable at the same time. Like it's teasing you." She followed his gaze. "You feel untouchable sometimes." "I am. Most of the time." Silence stretched between them again. But this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy, brimming. She sipped the wine. He leaned back against the railing. Then finally, he said, "You scare me." She blinked. "Gee. What, you walk into a room and I forget everything I've spent years building. Control, routine, distance. Is that such a bad thing?" "It is," he said softly, "when I don't know if you'll stay." She didn't move closer. She didn't touch him. But she didn't walk away either. "I never planned to stay. But now I don't know how to leave." His voice dropped. "Don't." Later that night, she couldn't sleep. Her chest felt too full of what? She wasn't sure. Want, guilt, longing. Elijah called her around 2 a.m. He'd had a nightmare, he said, about losing her. Amara reassured him gently, promising she'd visit soon, her heart fracturing at the sound of his tired voice. She hung up and found herself walking down to the piano room, barefoot and quiet. She ran her fingers over the keys, then pressed 1. The sound echoed, soft and mournful. She began to play a lullaby her mother used to hum. Halfway through, she realized she wasn't alone. Ryan stood in the doorway, eyes shadowed. "You play?" "Barely. You played like someone who remembers." She shrugged. "My mom taught me. Before." He entered the room, not speaking. She didn't stop playing. When the last note faded, the silence was tender. Ryan came to stand beside her, and for once, the distance between them didn't feel like armor. It felt like surrender. "I didn't want this," she whispered. "Any of it. Not the lies, not the pretending. I know. But I wanted you to be the person I imagined that night." He exhaled slowly. "And what if I wanted to be that person for you?" She looked at him then, truly looked, and for a second, she saw it the version of Ryan without the billions, without the boardrooms, just a man with tired eyes and too many regrets. It was enough to make her hope, but hope was dangerous. 2 days later, everything changed. They were scheduled for another public appearance, Ryan's quarterly shareholder conference, where he'd speak on growth, innovation, leadership. Amara wasn't meant to attend. But last minute, PR insisted on showing unity, and she agreed. She wore a navy dress, sleek and serious, her curls pinned back, diamond studs in her ears, a symbol, a role. Everything was going fine until Jessie Monroe appeared. Amara spotted her across the room like a bad memory brought to life. Long legs, red lips, a smile too polished to be sincere. She hadn't seen Jessie since college, hadn't even thought of her until this moment. But Jessie had always had a talent for inserting herself where she wasn't welcome. She walked up to Ryan like they were old friends, touched his arm, laughed too loudly. And then she looked at Amara. "Oh, wow," Jessie said, "syrupy sweet. I didn't expect to see you here. Last I heard, you were serving drinks at the Hilton." Amara smiled tightly. "And yet, here I am. Life is full of surprises." Ryan glanced between them, sensing the tension, but not understanding it. Jessie leaned in conspiratorially. "Ryan, darling, did she tell you we used to share a dorm?" Funny how she always lands on her feet. The insinuation burned. Amara's blood turned cold. That night, back at the estate, Ryan asked about Jessie. "She's just noise," Amara said, "the kind that loves attention," but her voice betrayed her. Something wasn't right, and she could feel it. The walls were shifting again. This time, not between her and Ryan, but around them. Trust was fragile, and someone, somewhere, was getting ready to break it. Jessie Monroe had a way of inserting herself into lives she didn't belong to, and making it feel like she'd always been there. Amara knew this better than anyone. Their shared dorm back in college had been a minefield of charm and competition, of fake compliments and smiles sharp enough to cut. Jessie never outright betrayed anyone. She didn't have to. She simply let doubt seep in like smoke under a door, slow and poisonous. And now, after years of silence, she was here, reappearing like a storm on the horizon, just as Amara and Ryan's pretend relationship had begun to feel dangerously close to something real. At first, Amara tried to dismiss it. A coincidence. She told herself, Jessie just happened to work in PR now, just happened to show up at the same corporate function, just happened to remember their old friendship. But deep down, Amara felt the shift, the sudden cold in Ryan's gaze when Jessie spoke. The way Jessie lingered near his office at Carter Group. The way she smiled when Amara entered a room like she already knew something she shouldn't. Amara wasn't the jealous type. But this wasn't jealousy. It was instinct. Jessie was circling something. And it wasn't just Ryan. One afternoon, after another staged appearance for the press, this one a visit to a youth arts center sponsored by the Carter Foundation, Amara returned home to find a small envelope resting on her vanity. No name, no note, just a photo inside. A grainy image of Amara, from behind, leaving the hotel suite the morning after that fateful night. Her heart dropped, her hands shook. There were only 2 people who could have had access to that photo, Ryan, and whoever had been watching that night. But the question wasn't just who sent it was why now. And what were they trying to say? She confronted Ryan later, her voice tight. "Did you leave something in my room?" He looked up from his laptop, confused. "No." "Why?" She didn't show him the photo. Not yet. Something told her not to. She needed to understand Jesse's angle first. That understanding came faster than expected. At a Carter Group gala 2 nights later, Jessie made her move. The room sparkled with luxury crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, a jazz quartet, but all Amara could feel was tension coiling under her skin. She watched from across the ballroom as Jessie leaned into Ryan, hand brushing his sleeve, mouth too close to his ear. He didn't flinch, but he also didn't pull away. Later, as Amara stepped outside for air, Jessie followed, her heels clicking like gunshots on the marble. "You've done well for yourself," Jessie said, voice syrupy, from waitressing to wearing Cartier. Amara didn't rise to the bait. "Why are you here?" "Jessie." Jessie tilted her head. "Faux innocent. Why is anyone here, opportunity? Darling. And you were always too soft. Too trusting." She stepped closer. "Tell me something. How long do you think Ryan will play along when he finds out the truth?" Amara's blood froze. "What truth?" Jessie smiled, then leaned in and whispered, "That you weren't as accidental that night as he thinks." And then she walked away. It took every ounce of control Amara had not to follow, not to grab her and demand answers. She stood outside until her skin grew cold and her hands stopped trembling. What did she mean? That the night in the hotel wasn't fate, but orchestrated. But it wasn't. Was it Amara's mind spun? She had no memory of seeking out Ryan that night, no plan beyond finishing her shift and collapsing into bed. But Jessie, she had access to schedules, to rooms, to whispers. Could she have... Back home. Amara tore open the drawers in her room, searching for the photo. It was gone. In its place, a folded slip of paper. "You think he knows the real story?" She didn't sleep that night. Neither did Ryan. The next morning, over coffee, neither of them touched. Ryan finally said, "Jessie's back on the PR team." Amara looked up sharply. "You hired her, I didn't. The board did. She worked under one of the VPs. Her name came through in a reshuffle. You could have vetoed it. I could have. I didn't want to make waves." Amara stood, pacing. "She's dangerous. Ryan, she's not just ambitious, she plays dirty. I've noticed. She left something in my room, a photo of me, leaving the hotel." His eyes narrowed. "You think she's threatening you?" "She's doing more than that. She's trying to rewrite the story, twist it. She said you don't know the real truth about that night." Ryan went still, too still. "And is there something I don't know?" Amara's breath caught. She realized, in that moment, that he had never asked. Not really. He'd assumed they were two strangers who collided, and she had let him believe it. "No," she said finally. "But she wants you to think otherwise." He didn't press further. He just looked at her for a long, unreadable moment before saying, "Then we deal with her." But Jessie wasn't done. She'd started to leak stories first to blogs, then to local gossip sites. Whispers of a scandal, a cover-up, a secret past. Photos of Amara cropped in just the right way. Vague enough to spark rumors, clear enough to sting. One headline read, "From housekeeper to heiress, inside the Cinderella story no one's buying." Another asked, "Who really is Amara Johnson?" The narrative was shifting, and fast. And the worst part? The public started to question if Amara was just another woman riding Ryan's coattails. The next board meeting was brutal. Investors questioned Ryan's judgment. His mother visiting from Europe pulled him aside afterward, her voice cold. This girl is a problem. Either control it, or I will. That night, Amara sat alone in the piano room, her fingers hovering over the keys. She didn't play, couldn't. Her heart felt too bruised. Ryan found her there. Eventually, "I'm sorry," he said. "This isn't what I wanted for you." She looked up, eyes wet but hard. "You mean the headlines, or the fact that now I'm a liability? I mean all of it." She stood. "Then maybe it's time we end the deal." He flinched. "Amara, I'm tired of pretending, of being someone you parade to make your world look better. I came into this because I had no choice. But now I have too much to lose." He stepped closer. "So do I." But she didn't soften, not this time. The next day, she packed a bag, and when she left the Carter estate, she didn't look back. The apartment felt too quiet, too still. Amara hadn't lived alone in months, but returning to her old studio in Harlem made it feel like she'd been sleepwalking all this time through luxury, through cold marble, through love she wasn't sure she was allowed to believe in. The Carter estate had been a world that both trapped and protected her. And now it was gone. Like a dream interrupted mid-sentence. She unpacked slowly, placing her clothes back in drawers that smelled of cedar and thyme. The air here was real, unfiltered, her own space again. Yet every corner whispered of something lost. Outside, the city roared, oblivious. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, calls from Bree, 2 from the Foundation, 1 from a tabloid journalist. She ignored them all. What was left to say, the narrative had already been hijacked. The press didn't want truth. They wanted spectacle. And Jesse was feeding it to them in slow, poisonous drops. Amara started working again at the youth center, behind the scenes this time, helping with grant applications and fundraising logistics. It grounded her, gave her a place where she wasn't being photographed, questioned, labeled. But it didn't silence the ache. She missed Ryan in moments that crept up like shadows in the way her hand curled instinctively for his at crosswalks. In the mornings when she reached for coffee and remembered he liked his with cinnamon. In the silence before sleep, where his absence pressed down on her chest like gravity. She didn't expect him to come. So when she opened her door late one evening and found Ryan standing there, dressed in a dark coat, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, she froze. He didn't speak right away, just looked at her, as if trying to decide whether he had the right. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "I know," he replied, "but I couldn't stay away." She let him in, not because she forgave him, not because anything had changed, but because something in his eyes looked like confession. They sat on the old couch. No pretense, no distance. Just the two of them. The world stripped away. "I found the original security tapes from the hotel," he said, voice low. The ones Jesse tried to bury. Amara's pulse quickened. "And you weren't looking for me that night. You weren't part of some setup." She was. He slid his phone across the table. On screen, Jesse in the hallway, bribing the night manager. Another clip, her slipping something into Amara's staff locker. Her face clear, her actions undeniable. She planned the whole thing. Ryan continued. "To put you in that room, to make it look like you seduced me. But you didn't. You were just caught in her game." Amara stared at the footage, her breath shallow. 1,000 emotion and surged relief. Fury, heartbreak, but most of all, a quiet, aching sadness. "You didn't believe me," she whispered. "I didn't know how," he said. "I wanted to. But I've spent my whole life expecting betrayal." And when Jesse started planting doubts, "You let them grow." He nodded. "I did." A long silence stretched between them. Then Ryan reached into his coat and placed something on the table. Her star necklace, the original, not the copy Jesse had flaunted. "I found it in the back of one of the vault drawers. She must have taken it the day after." Amara picked it up gently, like it might dissolve in her hands. Her mother's voice echoed again. "To my star, never dim for anyone." And then Ryan said something she wasn't ready for. "I'm in love with you." Her eyes snapped up. "Don't say that now. Not when everything's broken." "It was always broken," he said. "But you made me want to fix it. You made me want to be better." She looked away, tears burning. "You should go." He stood slowly. "If you ask me to, I will. I just need time." He nodded, stepped back. But before he reached the door, he turned. "Jesse's being investigated. She'll face consequences. But I don't care about revenge anymore. I just want the truth back." After he left, Amara sat in the silence for a long time, holding the necklace against her chest, trying to remember who she was before everything got so complicated. And for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to cry. The next morning, Bree showed up with bagels and attitude. "You look like hell," she said, dropping onto the couch, but a beautiful, mysterious kind of hell. Amara laughed wetly. "Thanks. I guess I heard about Jesse. Girls toast. And Ryan, he's blowing up group chats. I don't know what to do." "Bree? Well, let's start with something simple." She opened her tote and pulled out a small box, inside a pregnancy test. Amara blinked. "What, why?" "Because you've been nauseous every morning and crying at commercials." "That's not heartbreak. That's hormones. Half in denial, half terrified." Amara took the test. 10 minutes later, she sat on the edge of the tub, staring at the result. Positive. Her world shifted. Again. And this time, there was no undoing it. That evening, she walked through Central Park, the city glowing gold around her, hand resting unconsciously on her belly. The wind was soft, the leaves whispering like secrets. She didn't know what the future looked like, didn't know how Ryan would react, or what Jesse's final move might be. But as the stars blinked into the night sky above her, Amara whispered softly, "I'm not alone anymore." And for the first time in a long time, that thought didn't terrify her. The air inside the Carter's showroom buzzed with anticipation. Rows of press badges shimmered under white light. Cameras prepped. Voices hushed. A launch this grand, Ryan Carter unveiling his latest luxury collection. Should have been about fabric, design, legacy. But the real story was hiding behind the silk curtains, woven not from thread, but from lies unraveling in real time. Amara stood in the back corridor, unseen, her hands cradling her small, still unshowing belly, breath catching with every muffled sound of the growing crowd. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what was coming. But truth had been clawing at the edges of their world for too long. It was time. The investigation had begun quietly. Ryan had hired private forensic auditors, digital security experts, and 2 legal firms after confirming Jesse's manipulation. The pieces came together like broken glass, finally forming a picture. Jesse hadn't just tried to destroy Amara's image. Years before their lives entangled again, she'd already begun. In college, Jesse had stolen Amara's original design concepts, Amara's first sketches, her naive dreams scribbled in quiet moments. Jesse had submitted them to a national competition under her own name, winning a placement that launched her PR career. The betrayal had gone unnoticed then, until now. But it wasn't only the past she'd manipulated. The fake necklace she flaunted in tabloids, a cheap replica. The grainy hotel footage, a distortion, edited and framed to paint Amara as a calculated seductress. Most damning of all the pregnancy, Jesse's carefully planted story, shared in whispers with media contacts, used as leverage to imply deeper intimacy with Ryan than had ever existed. Yet hospital records showed no visits under her name, no ultrasounds, no appointments. A fabrication, like everything else. And then there was the drugging. Security footage uncovered only days earlier caught Jesse passing a wrapped pastry to a junior assistant during a pre-launch prep night. The assistant later admitted she'd passed the same baked goods to Amara before the gala that changed everything. A small dose, enough to confuse, to disorient, enough to nudge someone into the wrong room. Ryan had watched that video 3 times. Each time, his hands shook with something between guilt and fury. He wasn't a man prone to public spectacle, but some truths demanded an audience. Now, standing under the arch of his latest runway installation, flanked by towering displays and flashing lights, Ryan Carter adjusted the microphone, his face calm, voice low. "Before we celebrate innovation," he said, pausing as the crowd leaned in, "I need to speak plainly, not as a CEO, but as a man." He looked out, not at the cameras, but toward the far left wing, where Amara had just stepped into view. Her presence caught gasps from the audience, the click of shutters doubling. She stood still, eyes locked on his. "There have been stories," Ryan continued, "about the woman beside me. Some called her a social climber, a manipulator. But none of those stories were true. The real manipulator," his voice sharpened, "was someone we trusted. Someone who spent years weaving lies into fact, stealing credit, planting falsehoods, drugging a woman for attention." A beat of stunned silence. Then the screens behind him lit up images from the investigation. Evidence displayed for all to see, timestamps, altered images, forged documents. The room fell into a hush so absolute it felt like time had frozen. Ryan turned back to the crowd. The woman beside me was never part of some plan. She didn't need to be, because she was the only real thing in a world full of artifice. She didn't seduce me. She saved me from everything I thought I wanted. As the applause began tentative, then thunderous, Jesse was nowhere to be seen. Until the cameras outside the venue captured her being led away in cuffs. A storm of reporters shouting her name. Her expression wasn't panic. It was something else. A smirk, as if this was all part of her act. As officers opened the car door, a journalist asked the question everyone wanted to scream. "Any final words?" "Jesse." She turned, eyes cutting through the chaos, and said clearly, "I never worked alone." And just like that, everything changed again. The newsroom buzz faded into whispers after Jesse's parting words echoed across every outlet, from tabloids to primetime. "I never worked alone." It should have sounded like desperation, like a final grasp for relevance. But to Ryan, it didn't. It sounded calculated, and far too calm. A chill had followed him since Not the kind born from fear, but from recognition, the gut deep knowing that something unfinished had just stepped out of the shadows. Back at the penthouse, Amara moved like a ghost through the glass and marble quiet. She was nearly 3 months now. The weight of her body was changing, but the weight in her chest had grown heavier still. Ryan had stood for her, had fought for her, had spoken the truth with a ferocity she hadn't known he possessed. And yet, the silence after the storm was almost worse than the storm itself. Because Jessie was behind bars, but the words she'd left behind were still circling like vultures. Who else had been pulling strings? Who had something to gain from destroying them both? Elijah called her that night, his voice bright. "I saw you on TV," he said. "You looked happy." Amara smiled softly. "Were you proud? Always?" he said, even before the world was watching. She clung to that. Ryan had taken to late nights at the office again, though part of her wondered if it was avoidance more than necessity when he returned just before midnight. His jaw tense, tie loosened. He found her curled on the couch, sketching silently. Her fingers smudged charcoal across thick paper, shapes beginning to take form soft, flowing lines, like water or silk. "You're designing again," he said quietly. She nodded, not looking up. "It helps me think." He stepped closer. "I've missed this part of you." "Which part?" "The one that builds." She set the pencil down, finally meeting his eyes. "Do you believe her?" "I believe she doesn't lie without a purpose," he admitted, "and she never throws a match unless something flammable's nearby." Amara stood, arms folding over her chest. "Then we need to find the fire before it spreads." It was Bree, surprisingly, who gave them the thread to pull. She called early the next morning, her voice breathless, panicked. "Amara, you need to see this, now." At her apartment, Bree paced like a cat in a cage, on her laptop. Security footage played on loop grainy, time-stamped 2 weeks before Jessie's arrest. It showed Jessie in a parking garage, arguing. Not with a stranger, but with someone Amara hadn't seen in years. A tall man in a charcoal coat, his face half obscured. But the voice caught on partial audio was chillingly familiar. Amara sat down hard. "That's my father?" Ryan's brow furrowed. "I thought I haven't seen him since I was 17. He vanished after my mom died. Took what little money we had left. I thought he was gone for good." "But why, Jessie?" "Why now?" Bree zoomed in on the still image. The license plate on the car he left in. It's registered under a shell company tied to a holding group. Ryan picked up the name. His voice went cold. Marwick Holdings. It wasn't just any holding company. It was the group that had tried quietly and unsuccessfully to buy out Carter Group's sustainability arm last year. A merger Ryan had fought hard to block. They had interests in offshore sweatshops, labor violations, and had lobbied for deregulation that Carter Group had vocally opposed. It had been a quiet war. Now it wasn't. They planted Jessie. Amara whispered. She wasn't working alone because she never was. She was part of a campaign to fracture us, internally, publicly. And your father, Ryan added, must have been the leverage. The idea sickened her, that her father would sell her out for what money revenge. Bree paced again. There's more. I hacked into a side server linked to one of Jessie's burner emails. There were messages, scheduled leaks, talking points, a long game. They didn't just want to ruin Amara. They wanted to erode Ryan's credibility. If they could paint his judgment as reckless, emotional, they could undermine him at board level. Ryan clenched his jaw and force a leadership shift. Exactly, Bree said. And with him out of the way, Marwick's bid would slide through next quarter unnoticed. It wasn't just personal. It had never been. It was corporate warfare waged through manipulation, deceit, and the bodies of people they thought disposable. The next few days blurred into strategy meetings, confidential briefings, and security upgrades. Ryan's legal team launched an investigation into Marwick, tying them to Jesse's payments and tracking their internal communications. Amara tried to focus on logistics, but the betrayal clawed at her. She'd buried the pain of her father's abandonment years ago. But this, it reopened the wound in a way she didn't know how to close. She stood alone on the balcony one night, the city pulsing below. Ryan joined her, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "You're quiet." "I'm tired of being someone else's weakness." "You're not weak." "I feel it," she said, "like the moment I let someone close. They use me as a doorway into my life, my family, my fears." He was quiet, then said, "Then maybe it's time to change the locks." She looked at him. "Even if it means shutting you out too. If it keeps you safe, yes." She didn't answer, just reached for the mug, their fingers brushing. A moment later, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. "You think the past can't come home? You're wrong. You don't even know the whole story." Attached a photo of her and Elijah taken from across the street. Just that morning. She dropped the mug. Ceramic shattered on concrete. Ryan pulled her close. "We're not running," he said. "We're ending this. For good." And in the dim glow of city light, Amara pressed her palm to her stomach, whispering to the life inside, "We're going to protect you, no matter what comes next." The day began with rain, the kind that didn't rush or roar, but settled like a quiet decision across the city, soaking the streets and dimming the sky. Amara watched it fall from the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Carter penthouse, her hands resting on the curve of her stomach. 3 heartbeats beat with hers now. She could feel their fluttering lives grounding her, giving her something to protect beyond herself. And now, it wasn't just Jesse or a name on a burner phone threatening them. It was her father, reborn as a stranger with motives she could no longer predict. The photo from the unknown number haunted her. Elijah had been followed, watched, and if Marwick was behind it, this wasn't a vendetta, it was a full-scale takedown. Ryan moved through the room with restless energy, phone pressed to his ear, voice clipped, issuing orders in low, calm tones. His entire legal team was now on red alert. He'd ordered round-the-clock surveillance, increased firewalls, and initiated a private investigation not only into Marwick, but into internal board members who might have been compromised. "They want to make this about weakness," he told her once the call ended. "They want to prove I can be manipulated through you, through my emotions. But that's the mistake. You're not my weakness, Amara. You're the reason I fight harder." They staged their counterattack quietly. Ryan called an emergency board meeting. Amara came with him. No press, no show, just quiet power. The room was a theater of tension, executives fidgeting, eyes darting between Ryan and the compliance files placed neatly before them. He didn't raise his voice. He simply walked them through the timeline, the corruption trails, the financial links between Marwick Holdings and 2 internal shareholders who had been quietly voting against Carter Group's sustainability efforts for years. The final blow came when Bree, brought in via video call, played a recorded phone call between Jesse and one of the board's financial officers, revealing their collusion in leaking internal strategy to Marwick in exchange for offshore investments. When the room fell into stunned silence, Ryan didn't gloat. He looked tired, but resolute. I built this company to be a legacy of better choices. I will not let it be sold to people who profit off silence and fear. The board voted unanimously. The corrupt members were ousted. Legal proceedings were filed before sunset. That same night, Amara received a call from an unknown number again. This time, a voice answered. Her father's. Amara, he said, softly, as if her name still belonged on his tongue. It wasn't meant to go this far. Her throat tightened. You watched me from the shadows. You used Jesse to get close. I needed leverage. They promised you money, she cut in, and you sold me. Again. His silence was heavy. I'm pregnant, she said, with triplets. The silence broke like glass. I didn't know. You didn't care to know. He said her name again, but it didn't land the same way. She hung up, later that week. The press caught wind of the board shakeup. The narrative flipped from scandal to survival. Amara's name trended not as a cautionary tale, but as a symbol of strength, a designer emerging from the wreckage, a mother protecting her future. Carter Group's shares surged. On a warm Friday morning, Ryan took Amara to a quiet estate outside the city, away from the noise, the cameras, the ghosts. A house surrounded by wild gardens, where wind moved like breath through tall grass. I bought this years ago, he told her, but it never felt like a home until now. She stood on the porch, watching him light a fire inside, her heart fuller than she thought it could be. That night, curled together under soft blankets, her fingers resting on his chest, she whispered, Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we never met? I do, he said, and it terrifies me. Weeks passed. The world turned quieter. The pregnancy advanced. Amara's body changed, and Ryan's touch followed it with reverence. He read to her belly at night, made her smoothies he swore were nutritionally optimized, held her when hormones made her cry over commercials and cookie ads. Then one morning, her water broke. The delivery was long, fierce, and full of fear. But in the end, 3 cries filled the hospital room. 2 girls, 1 boy, tiny, furious, perfect. Ryan cried openly for the first time. They named them Maya, Nova, and Saul Star, new, son. The nurse pinned a visitor badge on Ryan that read, Father. He looked at it like it was the only title he'd ever wanted. As the city moved outside, unaware of this small revolution in a quiet room, Amara looked at her children, then at the man beside her, and thought not even the deepest betrayal could touch this. Not anymore. Their past had been chaos, but the future, finally, was theirs.